Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hustling Sideways podcast. I'm Alan Halas. I'm a music writer.
And I'm Jim Love, and I'm a keynote and motivational speaker.
And this is episode number 93.
93. We are excited.
Sideways.
Yes, and it is like the dead of winter here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is the first day it snowed.
Yeah.
And everyone loses their inhibitions.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody knows how to drive. It is absolutely terrible
Yeah,
outside.
it's a
and
blast.
also, we saved a bunch of bonus episodes. There may be some from when it was like, we got like a weird heat wave that happened.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we're
I
going to
forgot
put stuff
about
out
that.
in January where we're
So
going to have
really
like
we're gonna mess with your minds. Yeah, we are not a reliable calendar when it comes to listening to our shows. You're gonna think it's something different, but sometimes we stack up episodes.
If they get their weather from exclusively what we're wearing on the podcast,
it won't go well. Yeah.
No, they've got many other
Speaking of
choices.
what we're wearing, I'm wearing my lunch today. So
there you go.
forgot how to eat. And if you can you have them can you zoom in on this?
I'll do it in post.
Yeah. So
That's
there's I was eating today, and then I looked down, and I had lunch everywhere. So
Is this like in a meeting that you had this?
No. Well, you know what? I was on virtual meetings today, and I was able to like position my camera to be like here and up.
Good call.
Little pro tip. Yeah, do that. But we're good to go. We're in the clear. But I wanted to be real about that because it's been bothering me crazy, driving me nuts for about 4 hours.
Well, it's not about the most professionalism.
It's not.
It's just about getting the job done. That's what we do.
I'm full. I had good lunch, and I'm comfortably full. I'm
Well,
not stuffed, but I'm comfortably full. We'll call it that. Dinner's next.
That's our new side podcast, Comfortably
Great,
Full.
yeah.
I like the name of it.
You heard it here first. Well, speaking of, I don't know. I don't have no transition.
Yeah,
we have a guest. So usually there's like a great transition, and today we don't have one.
We are comfortably ready to be full of knowledge.
There we go.
From
yes.
our great
and
guest.
Sometimes we eat with people, and I've eaten before with our next guest, so that's fantastic. So
there we go.
I am in, as some of y'all may know in my career, I am in the staffing industry, which is awesome. And I have a guest who is also in that industry and then some and doing a whole lot. We have Michelle Cox, who is an executive coach and got her start doing a whole lot more things that you'll find out about because she's on the show. So give it up for Michelle. So glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank
you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Ignore Jim's lunch.
It's
these
fine.
I know. I'm just going to stare at it the entire time.
Yeah.
Just sit like this and like cower in the corner. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, you just got to own it. So,
there you go.
like, make people feel comfortable. Like, hey, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to show up
you can
perfect.
spill stuff all over yourself.
There
too.
you go.
That'd be great.
Yeah, exactly.
Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your background. Where are you from originally?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Nice.
So born
We've
and
heard of
raised
that.
here.
Yeah.
I took a hiatus and I went to Chicago for about 16 years.
Okay.
Then I came on back. Wisconsin just pulls you back in,
does.
but really for family purposes.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you live like downtown, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I have the best view. So I'll talk about this, but I created a vision like 15, 16 years ago when I didn't know what a vision truly was. And one of the things I want to do is to wake up and watch the sunrise. And I get to wake up, watch the sunrise over the lake, over the river. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm very blessed and lucky.
There you go.
It's like a summer home in 20-degree weather.
Yes, pretty much so. It feels like that.
That's great.
As long as you don't look down on the river and see when it's frozen.
Yes, exactly, for sure. So tell us a little bit kind of about just getting started where, what was kind of high school and college in Milwaukee, I'm sure.
So I didn't go to college. Which is something that a lot of people don't know about me is my dad was sick, and so I made some choices that I would take care of him and forego. I was, you take the gap year. I had said, I'm going to take a gap year. And that gap year turned into, I found a career, which it doesn't normally happen for folks. And happened to be, I found a career in sales at that point in time. And that's kind of what started my quote unquote, like, real adult life.
Yeah. How did you end up in sales? Like, did someone offer that to you, or did you find it?
I worked at a pager company, and
there you go.
I know, and I started at the bottom. I started as, like the person that answered the calls for people that were complaining, and then they moved me into major accounts. I was really good at building relationships and loved major accounts because that was a big piece for me. I'm like, if you can build a relationship with anybody, then you know what? Then you know what their problems are, and you can solve those problems. Sure. So that was like kind of the catalyst for sales.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you did, how long were you like in a sales role for?
Oh, my goodness. So 4 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure, and you probably learned a lot.
I learned a lot. I learned that I don't like outside sales.
There you go.
So I love major accounts. Do not like outside sales, and there's a big difference between the two. So if you want to give me an account to nurture, care for, really great at it.
Yeah.
Pounding and knocking on doors. I am just not like a natural salesperson. It's not fun.
I am not either by trade. Not a cold caller. It just doesn't. It doesn't come to me.
I like show up quickly when people are like, I don't think so. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, have a good day.
I'm always the person that I'm always the person that I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to bother this person.
I know how it
But
feels.
at the same time, like, you kind of need to bother that person, right?
I like show over really fast though. That's like my number one downfall.
For sure. Okay, so sales. Yes. And that leads to...
Then I started working for a cell phone company. And that was where I spent the majority of my career.
Okay.
And I took a step back. I hated sales so much. I said, okay, like there's this great company. Ironically, my aunt had worked there in Chicago. And she's like, you got to come work here. It's a great company. They really are believers on promoting within. So just take a position in the call center. Yeah, and I was like, oh boy.
Famous last two words right there. Yeah.
You start at the ground, but that will give you like edgeway to get into major accounts, into major accounts with the company. And I was like, okay, so I started in call centers, and it was easy. I mean, literally, it was just easy. Like you answer a call, you take care of the customer, and okay, you're done. But I was promoted very quickly because I was overqualified for the position, and they moved me into a leadership role within 3 months of being there.
That's awesome.
Which was fantastic, and I kept growing and growing, and I stuck with the company. I was there for 16 years.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, Jim, you and I started kind of in a call center.
We did.
Basically, inside sales at an insurance company. Both of us, that's where we met each other.
I can't say we ever made like... Inside sales is a pretty aggressive term.
We were not promoted to leadership.
We weren't also like so.
Well, we were also college.
We were making sure that people were good with like the service that they had.
Yeah.
And like I would say 95% was voicemail. Like
most of the time was leaving voicemails, and
which I got good at that.
When you weren't leaving voicemails, you were trying to just not get hung up.
That's pretty much what it was. Yeah. But that's it. That's probably how you gotta learn how to talk to people.
Sure.
That's it.
So did that leadership role then eventually take you into the world of staffing, or
it did eventually. Sort of? It did. So ironically, like throughout my career, I did a lot with the organization, and I was tapped. I did really well at vendor relations, really shocking in this moment, based upon what you know about me right now, but that translated into contingent workforce. And so they tapped me and said, hey, our whole thing is broken. And it was a lot of vendor relations and setting up systems and structures and processes, etc. And I was like, okay. They're like, come in and fix it. Yeah. And I was all for the challenge. Yeah. And so that's what led me into staffing.
Yeah. So I think the two things there. So for people who don't know what a contingent workforce is, it's anyone who's not a full-time employee. Okay, so like payrolled employees, independent contractors, that type of thing. The second thing is people always say they get into contingent workforce by accident. And that is exactly what you're describing, 100%. Which I love. Yes, that's it.
100% by accident. But I knew nothing.
Sure. And so you're just thrown into this world, make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah. What was the first couple weeks like? They're just like trying to figure out what this was.
Yeah, so I was tasked. So I was reporting to our chief diversity officer, and he tasked me within 30 days to like come up with a strategy of how I wanted to go about and how I wanted to restructure and do everything to present to our CHRO. And I was like, oh, fantastic. I have 30 days to learn this business. It was great. I have never downloaded so many white papers in my life to read all the terminology, the technology terms. I was like, is there an acronym for everything in this?
There is. Yeah, literally is. Yeah, and it's actually frightening how many acronyms there are in this industry.
Okay, so I would do terrible in that. I know that for sure. Because honestly, the way that I know that is because my wife's an athletic trainer, and then she was talking to somebody else that's a doctor.
Oh, and so it's like a different language. Yeah,
it was like they're talking about I have no acronyms, but the WHO and the this and the that.
That's the WHO.
I know. And it was like, I was like, oh yeah.
Even I knew that one.
And I was just sitting here like, I was like, oh, I've got NBA TV at home. Like, I don't know.
You'll get
I've got ESPN.
You'll get like an email with the subject line having 4 acronyms in it, and you're like, I know what the email is. Like that's the daily world of
language. That was exactly what it is.
That took a while. I mean, I would say 6 months for me to figure that out. Like, I also didn't have to make a presentation in 30 days to C-suite, so that probably helped. But like, I started off in sales support, so I had to support all of our sales team doing that, and I was like, I need to know what they're talking about. And there were a lot of questions asked. If I look back, I'm like, yeah, I didn't get it. And I actually saved some of those emails. So I think they're really funny. I'm like, what does VMS mean? I was like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, most of the time you're Googling things. And
all the time.
For the record, no idea what VMS means.
Yeah,
people
vendor management system.
Sure.
Yes. Write that down, Alan.
You know what? You could have told me it was anything, and I would have been like,
sure.
Yeah. I know VMA. That's video.
There you
music
go.
award.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what it is.
That's what I know. Okay. Okay, so managing people through their 30 days to learn the whole company.
Yes.
Diving into the pool head first.
Yes.
I mean, after you do that and you're learning it, like, how quickly do you start managing a team and realizing that you can do this sort of thing? When's that kind of moment of being like, I feel like I can sink. I can swim here, not sink.
Well, the first things is that I came from customer service operations. So I was leading customer service operations, and I was working 78 hours a week.
Okay. Yeah.
And so then I moved into HR, into the staffing world, and I was like, oh my God, everybody goes home at 5 o'clock. I didn't even know what to do with myself. I was like, so first of all, it was like, oh, I have all this time and space. I could literally take everything in that I wouldn't have been able to from a learning perspective if I was still operating the way I had been.
Sure.
So it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, you're just feeding me like all this learning and curiosity. And it was super fun for me. And I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
But after I presented, I kind of had gone out and I didn't know enough to be dangerous. I knew enough to be sort of dangerous. But then I was like, okay, high level. I had like 10,000 foot altitude. I knew what I wanted to do from a strategy perspective. But I hadn't quite gotten down to what does my team look like? What am I building here?
Sure.
And that took me about, I would say, 90 to 120 days. After that, then I was like, okay, now I know what I'm doing and I know who I want. And I started building my team.
Sure. Yeah. What did you realize you wanted?
I went from an outsourcing service provider who was responsible for a managed service provider who is MSP who is responsible.
Totally. Got it.
See, did you not?
That's it.
I wanted to make sure I called it out. But I went from having that external, and I realized that it wasn't the quality. We were trying to give them different opportunities over the 90 days, 120 days, and they weren't coming back and improving. And so I said, okay, I'm shifting to what my strategy was, and now I'm going to bring it in-house. And I'm going to build my own team, and I'm going to support it so we can do it the way that I know how to do vendor relations the best.
Okay.
And it really is all that experience coming in from what you had seen and heard.
Yes.
And I think that what people don't realize is how much that compounds over the time of like if you see something, say it. Like, this is what I want. I know what kind of team members. Did you have like folks in mind, like the people that you were thinking, like, or like talent and skill sets in mind of what you wanted to build?
Not quite yet, because I was still learning. Like, I knew what I wanted to do, but then it came to, okay, here is like high level, the structure I want to put in place. Here's what I need, where the gaps are today. I need to fill those gaps.
Okay.
And as soon as I could understand, like, okay, here are the gaps I need to fill, and then here's the tactical stuff that they need to do, then I was like, okay, now I know who I need, what I need to put in place, and I can go find the talent behind it.
Yeah. How much of that, so I am always of this belief that, like, everything you do, kind of, you pick up pieces here and there. Do you think, like, if you didn't have that sales background originally and that ability to communicate, would that have made, like, how much of a difference does that make for you? Or do you pick up on that at least when you're, building your team?
Very much. Like, because it's relationship building. Sales is all about relationship building. At least for me, that's what I boil everything down to is, and I had that core foundation to be like, I know how to go out and talk to people, learn from people, and also get to know them to see what they're passionate about. So if they're not passionate about doing something that I know is really key and necessary, then they're not going to be a great fit for my team.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
a good point.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're doing a lot of this work, and is there an inkling? When does the inkling start coming in that maybe you can coach some leaders? Like, is this farther down the road, or is you starting to maybe have this moment, or what? When does it start, sort of, to get into your like, wow, maybe I want to do something by myself?
Yeah. Well, that took a while.
Yeah,
so yeah. I was getting, my leader had gone through a executive coaching leadership development course, and he kept tapping me. Our company had stopped doing leadership development, and that was a big piece for the company. It was one of the things I loved about the company, is they really invested in their leaders, so they could then coach, develop the teams that they were responsible for.
Sure.
And that impacted the customer experience. Business model was truly flushed out.
Yeah.
They started pulling away from the leadership development. So he first went out, found his own. Then he was like, Michelle, you got to come. They let you do an observation. So I go do an observation. They're like trying to do follow up with me. And I'm like, nope. I'm like, I'm not ready. And it took about a year after. Okay. So I was already, let's say, I think 11 years into my career, 12 years into my career at that point. But the catalyst for me was really like, if I'm showing up, I'm working with all executives. I'm working with in-house, like internally and externally. Right. I'm having all of these conversations. I have teams. I'm really working and collaborating. I'm coaching all over the place. I need to show up as my highest and best. And what's going to allow me to do that?
Sure.
And so I finally pulled the trigger and said, okay, I'm in.
Okay.
And it was
a
12-month program.
Off to the races. Yeah. Yes. Off to the races from there.
Yes.
Lots of learning experiences, I'm sure, along the way of beyond what you were already doing. Like, what was maybe the biggest thing that you could pick up out of that program that you were like, okay, I'm running with this now?
Yeah. So I, personally, I had a life-changing experience. So my sister passed away very, very unexpectedly. And that was like the catalyst for me to say, wow, what am I doing? Like, it was the first time I've ever taken 2 weeks off of work.
Yeah.
Ever.
Sure.
And I had my own coach through that program. So not only do you have all these people around you in the program, but you also have your own personal coach. And it was the first time that I had taken a step back and really started examining, like, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be known for?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes that's when there's tragedy, you start questioning things or making decisions, and that's a lot of people's stories is something similar where this particular moment stopped time, and you're like, wow, like this is like where am I at? Like, what do I need to be focusing on? And it gives you some clarity every now and then.
Yeah.
And obviously that's
and I was going to say too, with like in terms of like, we deal with a lot of entrepreneurs, side hustlers, people that get buried in work. Yeah. And you know what I mean? People that are just continually busybodies. Jim and I are both that way, I think. At least I know I am.
Yeah, definitely.
You are definitely for sure. Yeah. I know that. But when things like that happen, like, then you have to stop and look at like 1,000 miles out and be like, wait a minute, why am I, spending 80 hours a week doing this thing that is tedious, that I maybe don't love? And then that's when you start kind of getting your vision of like, okay, well, this is where we need to go. And not that these things motivate people, but they can 100% motivate people too. It doesn't, everybody's different that way.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was that I had lost my dad had passed away in 2009, but I worked through the grief. Like, that's how I dealt with the grief. Yeah.
Totally. And I've done the same thing not with a parent, but yes.
Yeah. You work through it because you avoid it. It was like that was my beautiful avoidance strategy.
But you sound like an Irish Catholic. Are you sure you're not that?
I know, right? But then when my sister passed away, it was like, I had my own coach, and it was like, you're not going to avoid this.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, we're going to double down on this. Like, self-care is super important. Yeah. You're going to take the time. You're going to lean into the grief. And I was like, oh,
how uncomfortable was that?
Super.
Like, did it take a little while to be like, I'm actually going to do it the way you're proposing?
Oh, I had panic attacks.
Yeah.
Like literally, I was having like panic attacks where I couldn't even run. because I didn't know how, I didn't know how to do it.
You were just frozen from it. And, yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh.
So.
And so what this happens, and what is your vision start becoming?
Yeah. So I was I started questioning, who do I want to be, what all of this, and I love leadership. I love coaching. It's the thing that gets me super excited when I see my employees getting promoted. Yeah. I never cared. Some people get real attached to their employees where they're like, no, I don't want you to go.
Oh, sure.
And I'm like, no, there's an opportunity.
Yeah,
it's a
that's
promotion.
How it should be. Yeah.
Please, what can I do? What skills do you need to learn?
It's one thing to be loved. It's another thing to hold someone back by being I don't want them to leave for that next great thing. It's hold on.
Oh, totally. I have had this with the music website that I run, where I've got writers, and one of our music director moved on to a full-time job writing in journalism this year, and he was only freelancing for us before that. And so he was like, are you sure? And I'm like, no, man, you should go
do that. That's the right choice.
Do the thing that we're all chasing, right? Do the thing that you're chasing, for sure.
Right.
So when do you strike out on your own and start coaching as your own
So I started coaching that, I would say 3 months after that, I started doing some pro bono work just to get okay, do I love working with it? Is it an internal thing, external thing? What does it look like?
Right.
And that's where it started.
Yeah.
And so then I was I love working with all these different people, because totally different businesses, totally different impact you can make, because you're not just impacting your one team. You're impacting every single team who you're working with, essentially. Right. So the impact was
who gave you your first shot to coach them? How you got to get a client, or you got to get someone that will do it.
Yeah, you do. You have to get your first client, and it was referral. So
awesome.
I was very blessed in saying, hey, I'm going to take on some pro bono stuff. And at first I was really uncomfortable even telling people. I was like, what am I doing? I'm coaching. I'm a coach. No, I'm this person for staffing. And so I had to it was almost a little identity crisis, but that was the first person gave me a shot, and I was like, this is fun. She was in the military, so it was a very different situation.
Yeah.
But almost if you can think of the most challenging from a coaching perspective, military is very right, wrong. There's a lot of context driven. So the amount of impact you can have, super huge.
Yeah, totally. Are you somebody that has always kind of had an entrepreneurial kind of spirit of were you the kid at the lemonade stand, or somebody that was I'm going to strike out and do this? No, never.
You're no.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, it's great.
That's why it's really cool.
I never ever thought I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to work for myself, and I'm going to create my own destiny. So
do you feel like an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Okay, because sometimes people are I just do my thing, but won't admit that they're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I do now. If you would have asked me probably 6-7 years ago, I would have been I'm a solopreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur. I would have tagged. But now I have a team, and I have a team that supports me, so it's not just me. So I'm no, I'm an entrepreneur. When you start paying other people to support you,
that's when you know.
It was kind of the switch and the trigger for me.
What was the scariest part of that leap? Because that moment is, I think, for everybody, the moment where you're oh my God, this is real. Even if you're working a 9 to 5 on top of it, you're still going there's that little moment that everybody has where you're am I crazy for doing this? What am I doing here that is maybe not the right move? know?
Yeah, first of all, let me just tell you, it took my coach 8 months of coaching me.
To even get to that point?
To even
a
leave.
Over half a year to be okay.
Yeah, to actually take the leap. And then when I was okay, it's here. I'm ready. And I felt like I created it on purpose. I really set my team up. I came in with recommendations of who should take over my team, who they would report to. I did it all. I've really set it up to say, you don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's a great, that is kind of the goal, right? Is to set up that situation, but you're well, I'm here now. Go run, go play. You know what I mean? Go do your thing, and Do you when you have folks that utilize you in your talents?
is there a sense of nervousness like for them of like what do we do? Like I'm uncomfortable in this, or is it very transparent in the sense of like here's what we're going to do like step by step, and you have to like how is the buy-in like kind of right away?
Yeah, so it depends on it really depends on like what client it is. Like, so if a corporation is hiring me to coach someone, an executive, it can be different because they're like, oh, something's wrong.
Oh,
so
sure.
they're hiring her to fix me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so they're almost combative from the start then,
yes.
because they're worried that they're going to get fired.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the Bobs in the movie Office Space, like coming in to like tell us what would you say you do here.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Do you battle that? Like, is that like a stereotype? You'd have to walk in and battle something that's like I'm here to help, but also like everyone listen, like.
Yeah, I'm really big on confidentiality, and I think that's and because I know how to build relationships, I'm like, listen, this is your safe space. Yes, they hired me, but I've made it very clear they will not know what happens in our sessions unless you and I are coming together and having that conversation.
Yeah, that's good.
Sure.
So it's not like, oh, I'm going to go back and tell them, what you are doing or what you aren't doing.
Right.
Or you're making this progress, you're making that progress. I'm very transparent. So my client comes first.
Sure.
Not the organization necessarily that hired me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of trust building then too, because there's still always that thought, I'm sure, in the back of whatever client's head that's going to be like, oh, they're going to tell my boss. They're going to tell whoever.
Like anonymous surveys. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Anonymous. Yeah. There's probably a little bit of apprehension even then.
I would say it takes them taking a leap and telling me something that they're like super scared to say, and then realizing that it doesn't come back to them. And that's the moment that they're like, oh,
the door's open now. I can
like now I can just fully spew, because that's when you like where you find the gold, and where you find what's really going on is when they start really divulging their lives and really like, this is the crap of it all.
Yeah.
So then we can get in and really start like finding out like what drives it.
The aha moments of like they say, okay, that like you probably live for that. Like tell me this, and that's where a foundation of what we can work with.
Yes. That's super fun.
So trust building with that, relationship building from that, it all kind of comes full circle into that too. But then, like, I mean, to also have to, like, is there a process? You have to read people, right? Like, everybody that you're dealing with is different.
And I work with all different industries too. So it's not one industry that I'm focused in. So I can have someone that's an investment professional. I can have somebody that is working in contingent workforce or staffing. It's so I'm like all over the place. So it really is based on them in particular. But it's like, okay, how do I need to go back here. Like, so I'm like circled back to exactly what your question was. So I want to make sure that I hit it because my head was going too fast. I felt it going.
Yeah, I just mean like you have to read people and catch everybody's personality type and figure out what makes them tick a little bit.
Very much so. So I do an intake session during the first session. So and it's like, when I say intake, it's from the time that you were like growing up and identifying key moments, because that's how you start identifying what makes people tick today. Sure. Because a lot of our behaviors come from, whether we know it or not, our childhood years, and that's really where all the formation comes.
That's so true. Totally. Yeah. It's like scary to think about that too, honestly. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Jim, you're the same person you were when you were 4 years old.
I know, and it's determined everything. You don't even know. Unfortunately, yeah. All the things I've done are right from preschool. Yeah. But it's like there could be trauma. There could be, just the amount of things, and probably influences a lot of what people will do with their career, and and then they come back to that. Does some folks like treat it like almost like a therapy session, or are they really trying like? I'm thinking like, especially because they might like emote or like realize something like, but then to really find like the professional aspect to care. Like how do you balance that?
Yeah, so I feel like there are people that will relate to it and be like, oh, it's a therapy, and I'm like, ooh, well, not in my sessions, right? Because I make it really future focused. So we might create awareness that is like, they didn't know that this was a driver and all of us, or a trigger for them, and that's the awareness. But now I want to take it and do something with it.
Yeah.
So everything is future focused. Okay, what structure do we need to put in place? Where do you want to be? If you were creating it differently, what would it look like? So it's all future. So we can take it, and then there's always actions and practices, and these poor people, they walk away with 5 to 10 different things to do each week, because that's where it doesn't come into like therapy and healing.
Great point.
Sure.
It's really action based, so you're moving towards your future.
Yeah.
And you just so happen to feel things as you're doing it, which is good. That's the way it should be. Yeah.
Is there any particular success story? You don't have to name names, obviously. Confidentiality is big.
Yes.
But any particular success stories that you can think of where it's somebody that, you know, you just saw the difference dramatically when you that really was like a motivator for you?
One of my, like, this was so funny because this was a staffing client, and this was back in the day when I was finally owning, I'm a coach, and I'm also this person for staffing, and I was kind of like, so I started coaching, and that was like my he was a huge success story for me. He was a business owner. His business was on the brink of bankruptcy. And for 6 months, I saw him at conferences, and I would follow up with him, and he would be like, I so need to hire a coach. But he wouldn't hire me.
Oh, gosh.
But I played the long game. I'd be like, hey, just checking in. Like, no pressure. It wasn't my jam to pressure people. It still isn't. So he finally hired me, but he was like, I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know that he was on the brink of bankruptcy. Yeah. It was one thing he didn't tell me.
Sure.
But he told me everything else. I mean, he cried to me. It was like, there was a lot in it. But fast forward, like, I worked with him for a little over a year and a half. And fast forward to being on the brink of bankruptcy to fast forward, he sold his business. Now he's a multimillionaire.
Wow.
And so that's success. And it's not like that's a business side, but personally speaking, like, he started taking care of himself. He started investing in him, like taking
huge turnaround across the board.
Everything.
Could you feel it as sessions were going, like building to that?
Yes. Yes.
By the way that he was talking, like by like some of like word choices, like that type of thing.
It was like his actions as well as his intentions. It was both. Like, his intentions were, he would have all these great intentions. I love business owners, and I also find a lot of them are visionaries, so they have a lot of shiny object. Yeah. Like, ooh, this is cool, or this is cool, let me do this. And his intentionality was like, no, we're going to do this. I'm going to complete it. This is the thing.
That's awesome.
And so it was like the action behind it, everything shifted.
Yeah.
I love that.
I can fully relate to the shiny object part of it too, because like sometimes you're like, oh, well, I'll be like obsessed with, we're going to do this for like 3 months, and then be like, we're going to try this. And then, whether it's something on social media or something with like, for what I do, making a lot of content, like, oh, we're going to try some AI things and write with that or whatever. Like, I will try them, and then, they fizzle. And then the next thing fizzles, and then whatever, and then like, you just keep bouncing around from thing to thing. So yeah, so if you can help people get on task, that is amazing in itself.
Yes. Yeah. So it's fun. On the flip side of it, I have people that come to me and they're like, I hate my job, or I'm unhappy in my career. And so helping, like, I had a client that came to me, and she had literally just left her company, and she was like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing next. I'm burnt out. I don't know what I want. And she got a job. It aligned her passion with like her expertise. And fast forward to a year and a half later, and she's now promoted. Right. A very large promotion as well. And so she's now a president. Wow. And so it's, when you see like success like that, those are like, okay. Like,
let's go. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go.
That is the motivator for you then.
What's the most gratifying part of all of it?
Oh my God. When honestly, when a client gets what they want.
Yeah.
Like, awesome. And it's not just like what they want, but it's like fulfillment. Like, they feel fulfilled because I feel it.
Yeah. That's awesome to see. I mean, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that's like a big lofty goal coming up that you're like something that, I mean, it sounds like you're obviously doing very well already, but like anything that you're like, man, if I could only do X, Y, Z.
My goodness, I have a lot of lofty goals. I have a passion project, and this is one of the things that I'm playing around with, and I haven't quite fleshed it out yet.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned is that I would say early years, like in your career, let's just say in your 20s, that you don't necessarily, especially for young leaders, organizations don't invest like they used to invest in really training you, giving you tools, resources to be a good leader.
Sure.
And while they wouldn't necessarily be an ideal one-on-one client for me, I'm like, how can I give them the tools that they need, like foundational? It's not going to be every single thing that you can need to be a successful leader, but it's going to give you foundational pieces. So at least you know, hey, I can go in and have a crucial conversation.
Yeah.
I can go in and I know how to have a performance conversation.
Something that doesn't make you feel like you're the rookie.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's so critical.
Yeah. That is, seriously.
I mean, like the amount of people that are just put in positions and being like, good luck, you know, like you worked hard, got promoted.
And
but
sometimes
then, like,
it's
what
purely
do I do?
an age thing too. Where you're just like, I'm the youngest person in this room. Like I am not going to get listened to because of that. You know what I mean? Like,
I like that because I've seen it a lot. Like, and then people get overwhelmed. They don't feel like they belong in that spot, and it's like, where do you go from there? And who's like, it's not their fault, but they don't feel equipped to much to take that.
Right. So it's a passion project to create that vehicle for them and give them that at a really affordable price.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to make it so like they're like, oh, there's no skin in the game. Because if you don't have skin in the game, how many times have you purchased a program that you're like, oh, it's $49.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, oh, totally.
Never do it again.
Yeah.
But so you have skin in the game that you're like, I want to do this, and there's benefit to me, and I paid for this, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah, you got to see the return on investment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I want to touch that. That's like a big passion for me.
Yeah. And this is done virtually and in person for you, right?
Yes.
Obviously, I'm assuming you would prefer in person for like everyone. But...
I don't.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't. So the way I coach is everything's over the phone.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't do anything.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Over Zoom. Prefer it that way because when you're in a call or you're on Zoom, it doesn't matter who you are. You're assessing the person that you're with.
Oh, sure.
Like you're like, oh, did I say the right thing?
Right.
Yeah, it's like a different just social thing that comes out of that you don't even realize that you're doing. Probably.
Yeah, it's almost like an unconscious judgment of that situation, that person, yourself.
Yeah. So my clients perform for me if I'm doing any face-to-face. So I have learned to control everything, so I can be as blank as a slate and they're still searching. So I do everything over the phone.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really have to listen.
Yeah, it's impressive. And I mean, well, Jim, you used to have to give talks over Zoom and have to learn to communicate entirely differently to that.
And that was like such the opposite of what you're talking about. You know, like I like doing virtual talks. I hopefully never again. Let's just say that
for me, reaction where you're like,
I have the energy of the room is what I need. And now that you're saying the way you approach it makes total sense that you would do it that way. And it's funny. I came in, I'm like, obviously you do it in person. Don't mind me. Yeah. But I think that's so cool and probably be different than what people would assume. You know, clearly for me, but like, it's just like the feeding off of it. Like when I was doing virtual talks, people would have their camera off on mute. And I'm like giving a keynote to myself, and I'm like, I remember getting like distracted and like all this kind of stuff, and then it was done. And I'm like, okay, I did like 40 of them because you could just like rinse and repeat, you know. Like I actually the amount of times I've spoken the last 10 years, I should not have gotten like 100, and COVID was the reason why I was able to. I did like 20 a year, you know, talks. Like because I was like, this is. I can come on anytime. I can walk to my living room and do a keynote. I did it so often, and. And you just made it work. And then after that, I'm like, okay, well, when this comes back, I'm coming to your school. Like, we're not doing it like this again. But yeah, that was a new skill that I'm glad I learned. And now in my career, it helps certainly when we have virtual presentations and things. But being there and picking up on what they're saying and like feeding off of that is just like so critical. But to everything you said, it makes like I could see why, like, the Zoom camera, especially, like, they're just trying to read what your reaction is. You'd probably be great at poker, by the way, the way you're describing. You know, like, you probably wouldn't give anything away.
I mean, yeah, I probably would because I do sit there. I can sit there with a straight. They train, like, that's how I was trained, ironically enough, is they train you, everything is in person.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Which, because they want you to build the skill set.
Right.
And so I was trained for it, and it's so much more comfortable. Everybody relaxes over the phone, but I can, from a virtual, like, giving a keynote.
Yeah, it was brutal.
I can't even fathom.
Yeah, that sucked. Yeah, I mean, I would do, you know, if someone were to call me tomorrow and be like, you want to give a virtual keynote, we'll pay you $100,000. I'd be like, I love virtual keynotes, they're great.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it was difficult, and you had to figure. It probably took me 10 to get really comfortable with it.
Sure.
And even then, I was like, okay, like, here we go. But it's the reality of where we're at, you know. But hey, well, so if folks want to reach you and find out, like, if I'm thinking, we have a lot of people in our lives who feel they could benefit from something like this.
So many guests on this show.
Yeah, that like want to, like, just like, especially when they're driving into entrepreneurship, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
My website, www.michellecox.com. There's a poor person out there that has Michelle Cox website.
Oh, no.
They get so many inquiries from me, so I just want to give you a heads up. Or feel free to call me. My social is out there, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Like, I have my information. It's not hard to track me down at all.
What does the other Michelle Cox do?
She's a real estate person in Kansas. I actually reached out to her and I said, hi.
I'm so sorry.
I'm really sorry. You probably get a ton of emails from my people. I'm like, are you still practicing real estate? I'm like, because your website's really boring. No, I'm kidding. I didn't say that.
What's funny is that you probably get none because no one's typing in Michelle L. Cox to reach her. So it's always going to be her to reach you. That's that's a classic.
It's a little painful. It is. But
really don't forget the L.
That's exactly
L
it.
for love.
Yeah.
There you go.
There
well,
we
it's
go.
not saying your mailman, but you know, I'm just going to throw it out there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah,
for
thank
being
you for
part of the
coming.
show. For everybody that's listening, if it's the first time that you're listening, or if it's the 93rd, or even beyond that, because of all the bonus
episodes. We've had many bonuses. That's right.
We are the Hustling Sideways podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We are also on YouTube. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Did I say YouTube?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I did now. We're there.
Yep.
So we're all over the place. So you can also find us, Hustling Sideways. We are everywhere. If you want to be a guest on the show as well, we've got an email. It is hustlingsideways@gmail.com. And Jim,
keep on hustling.
We will see you next week.
Peace.